Success loves speed. If you're fast, you'll be successful. You have to get there faster than anyone else. That is harmful narrative, and it's not true a lot of the time. Hey squirrels, welcome to AvyHD, where ADHD isn't some clinical diagnosis, it's just life. I'm Avy, your always honest tour guide through this beautiful mess. Over here, we're not about fixing yourself. We're about figuring out how to actually enjoy your life as you are. So grab a snack and let's go. Okay, reset. New week, fresh start, let's go. If you have ever said those words to yourself after a hard season, after a collapse, after a crash, after something broke, you know the pressure that I'm talking about. The script is so loud. You fell behind and now you need to catch up and you need to prove that you're still capable and you need to get your momentum back. We call this resilience. We celebrate it. We make content about it. We frame it as the mark of someone who has what it takes. But I want to offer you something different today. Because for a person, for a nervous system that just went through a collapse, that script doesn't feel like motivation. It feels like a threat. Get up, one more try, one more chance. This episode is about why bouncing back as a concept, as a strategy, and as a cultural expectation can actually make burnout worse. And squirrels, don't misunderstand me. This is not because rest is bad. And it's not because ambition is bad. But it is because that when you apply speed to a system that isn't ready for it, you don't create momentum. You create re-injury. I remember the first piece of advice that I got when I was thinking about starting my own business. And that piece of advice was that success loves speed. Success loves speed. If you're fast, you'll be successful. You have to get there faster than anyone else. That is harmful narrative, and it's not true a lot of the time. If that doesn't feel motivating to you, just like it doesn't feel motivating to me, or if your motivation has disappeared and small tasks feel super heavy and dread is showing up where excitement used to live, right? You're not sure if you're nervous or excited, but you're more in that nervous category. I want you to understand what's actually happening because it's not what you've been told. Let's start off by talking about what burnout actually is. Because if we get this wrong, everything that we build on top of that is going to be off. Anything else you try to do is going to be off if you don't understand what you're trying to get yourself out of. When we talk about burnout, we're not talking about just being tired. Burnout isn't about just being tired. Tired is a signal that the immediate demand was high. And tired responds to rest. When you rest, you're not tired anymore. Burnout is what happens when the demand has outpaced the protection for long enough that the body stops waiting for you to fix it and starts fixing itself. What do I mean by that? You are placing a high demand on yourself or on a system for a prolonged period of time without the protection that is going to protect you or the system. Therefore, the system, which in this case is your body, has to stop waiting for you to fix it and has to start fixing itself. We see this all the time in every kind of system. When people push back against systems, systems push back. When something is unclear in a system will break. The body is the exact same way. When you have more demand than protection for long enough, what happens is that your nervous system adapts. You don't go back to your baseline of where you were. You become more vigilant, meaning that your nervous system is scanning for threats more often, and it requires less evidence to be proven right that they did in fact see a threat. Your nervous system conserves energy. So it redirects resources from output towards survival. That's why your heart starts beating fast. That's why your fingers get cold. Your body is literally pulling blood away from your extremities towards the core organs in your heart, making sure that you're pumping blood and oxygen through your body at the rate in which you require if you were actually needing to survive something. But the majority of us are not actually outrunning a predator. We're not being chased by a lion. We actually need our non-essential functioning. Things like creative thinking, motivation, long-term planning. Eventually, if you leave yourself in that system that is breaking down for long enough, it will slow you down. And that slowdown might show up as exhaustion. It might show up as brain fog. It might show up as avoidance. It might show up as emotional numbness. Might show up as irritability that comes out of nowhere. Okay. For all of my snappy friends, I'm not judging you. I'm one of you. It might show up as just a complete loss of motivation and care for things that you used to care about. That's not weakness. That's not you proving to yourself that you've somehow become weaker. That is protection. Collapse is often your body saying, we cannot keep operating like this. And here's what matters about that. Your body was right. We all know this. When you're stressed and then you get a cold, when you have a cold and then it doesn't go away. We all know these things. There's a concept in stress physiology that's called allostatic load. Allostatic load is the cumulative wear on your body and your brain from sustained stress exposure. So it's not load that is happening right now. It is cumulative load and the wear of that load under sustained stress exposure. So sustained levels of stress for a sustained amount of time. What research on allostatic load shows us is that prolonged stress doesn't just deplete your energy. It actually changes how your cognitive systems function. Not permanently necessarily, but right now. And you have to undo it to be able to undo it. The way it could change your cognitive systems, like you could have slower decision making or heightened threat detection. Like we said before, you're always on the lookout. Low frustration tolerance, you're always irritable. Reduced working memory, it's hard to keep things in your mind, in your memory. So by the time you've hit the wall, by the time you're in the phase where nothing feels possible, your brain has already been reorganizing itself around survival for longer than you probably realized. It's like if you're doing an extreme diet and you're simply not consuming enough calories for what you need to keep yourself active during the day. Over time, you're going to literally weaken your body. Your body is literally going to adapt itself for survival and begin conserving calories, begin breaking down fat stores differently, begin storing food differently. A body in a survival state, a body in starvation is different than a body that's being regularly fed. The brain and the cognitive systems are the same. So by the time you hit the wall, like I said, you've probably been in this. Your brain has probably been reorganizing itself for longer than you could ever have imagined. And rest helps, of course. Sleep helps, stepping back helps, but none of those things undo the reorganization overnight. Which is why one ambitious Monday or one really good week cannot fix what took months and months and months to accumulate. I want to tell you guys about somebody that I love very much, who hopefully is listening to this episode. She listens to this podcast. Everyone in her family listens to this podcast. My goddaughter has always needed more sleep than the average person. Her body naturally wants to sleep late and wake up late. Not because she's lazy and not because she lacks discipline or drive. That's just her rhythm, and it's just how her system works. It's how a lot of ADHD people's systems work. That your brain kind of kicks back in late at night. So maybe you prefer to go to sleep at 1 or 2 or 4 in the morning and wake up a little bit later. That's just the way your system works. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. But for years, for most of her life, really, she's tried to override that. Not because she had to necessarily. Sometimes you have to. Sometimes you have to get up and get the kids to school. Sometimes you have got to get up and get yourself to work. Sometimes you got to get up and get yourself to school. So whatever. We live in this life where we have demands and we have responsibilities, and that requires waking up at a specific time. But sometimes it doesn't. And even in those situations where we insist on waking up early so that we're productive, so that we can get a jump on the day, so that we can whatever, that's not because you have to. It's because you feel like you should. And those are two different things. My goddaughter really felt like her natural rhythm was somehow wrong. Like other people's schedules and societal schedules were proof that she was failing at something basic. So she'd force herself up early and would push through the exhaustion and go through the day on fumes And then at night, when her body finally got what it needed, she'd feel guilty about needing the sleep. She'd wake up tired and judge herself for still being tired and then try harder the next day. And the cycle would deepen. Here's what I've watched happen over years of this pattern. It's not just the sleep deprivation that's costly. It's the mistrust that you're building with yourself. The constant message to my goddaughter, and I love you if you're listening, but to you, if this applies to you, the constant message to your body is that its signals aren't valid, that what your body is asking for is inconvenient and I should override it. You see that in people who learn to ignore their hunger cues, who learn to ignore their sleep cues, who learn to ignore any kind of cue that they might have. And that's what I see happen after burnout. Someone collapses. The system sends a clear signal. This is not sustainable. And the response from themselves, from their culture, from the people around them sometimes is override it, push through, get back up. You got this. Just keep going. And they do. And they're still exhausted. And then they judge themselves for not recovering fast enough. But an extra hour of sleep doesn't repair years of override. And one good week doesn't repair months and months of depletion. And the judgment, that harsh judgment of yourself, the judgment compounds the fatigue. Every time that you tell yourself you should be further along, every time you treat your exhaustion as evidence that you are a weak person, you are adding to the load that your system is already trying to carry. And what my goddaughter is slowly learning, and what I want you to hear today, is that her rhythm isn't failure. It's information. And when she stops fighting it and starts working with it, everything will get easier. Not because of her inherent capacity increased, because she stops spending energy at war with herself, which means that she has now more energy to use on other stuff. We need to slow down because speed feels unsafe. And let's talk about why speed feels so unsafe. Okay? After a collapse, and when I say a collapse, I mean a small collapse, a big collapse, a burnout, a little burnout, a big burnout, only you know what is going on with you. Okay? But after a collapse, a lot of people notice something that confuses and frightens them. The motivation that they had, that they relied on, that inner voice, that go get it voice disappears. Not just for the hard things, for everything. Small tasks feel heavy and focus is unstable. There's a kind of dread that shows up where enthusiasm used to live. And the interpretation that most people land on, the story that they're telling themselves is, I'm lazy. I've lost my edge. I just need more discipline. Why am I so undisciplined? But that's not what's happening. What's actually happening is this. Your system has associated speed with danger. Why? Because you weren't protected in the past. High output without protection led to depletion before. And your nervous system remembers that. It has a long memory. It literally is the brain. Not intellectually. It doesn't have a thought about it. It has a response that is built in at this point. So when you try to restart aggressively, new goals, full calendar, high expectation, brand new notebook, Monday motivation, your system tightens like your butthole clenching. And that's when avoidance shows up, and that's when procrastination shows up. And the thing that you desperately want to do suddenly feels impossible to start. That's not resistance to work. And it's not resistance to discipline. It is resistance to re-injury. Your system is not broken. It's being protective. It learned correctly, by the way, because that's what you taught yourself, that moving fast in this environment without protection leads to collapse. And your system doesn't want that to happen again. The problem is that most of us interpret this protection as a problem that we need to overcome. So we push harder. We try to force the motivation back through sheer will. And the system, reading that force as another threat, tightens further. Right? When we push back against systems, they push back against us. Imagine your seatbelt in a car. When you move forward nice and slow, your seatbelt knows that you're just trying to move and it moves with you. When you jerk forward, your seatbelt tightens. Why? Your seatbelt is a protective feature. It is there to prevent you from flying out the front windshield of the car or getting seriously injured in an impact. It's there to hold you back, to protect you. And when you jerk against your seatbelt really quickly, it's going to jerk back against you. It's going to tighten. All systems react the same way, including your own internal system. And that's why burnout becomes cyclical. Not because people lack resistance, but because the strategy that most people use to recover, which is just override and push, is the same strategy that caused the collapse. You wouldn't be in this position in the first place if you didn't have these patterns of behavior of pushing you through when you're not ready. Resilience as endurance is the trap. We have been taught that resilience means push through, recover quickly, prove you're strong, return to full capacity as fast as possible. But real recovery doesn't prioritize speed. It prioritizes safety. And when safety is present, when your system believes that it won't be asked to override itself into collapse again, motivation can return. Not because you forced it, because you stopped fighting it. We can all think of an example of a person in our lives who lost our trust. And they lost our trust probably by making a promise or saying that they would do something and then not following through and not doing it. And over time, we learned that this person's word doesn't matter. We learned that what they say, they don't really mean. And we learn not to trust them. The same applies to you. If you make promises to yourself that you don't keep, you're not going to choose to motivate yourself. You're going to choose to protect yourself because you feel unsafe. I really want to be clear about something before we go further. Slow re-entry is not doing nothing. It's not giving up. It's not accepting that this is permanent. And it's not weakness disguised as self-care. Like I'm just being weak, but I'm going to pretend that I'm putting myself first and I'm caring about myself. That's not what this is at all. Slow re-entry is doing less than your ambition wants and more than your fear trusts. Okay, I'm going to say that again. You're doing less than your ambition wants you to do, but more than your fear trusts you to be able to do. That is a very specific and intentional position. And it might look like fewer decisions per day, because decision load is one of the fastest ways to re-trigger depletion. It might look like shorter work windows, not because you can't do more, but because protecting capacity now is what makes more possible later. Maybe you have lower expectations of yourself, of your output. Lower your output expectations. Measure them against your current capacity, not pre-burnout capacity and not ideal capacity. Doing less might look like clearer boundaries around your time, around your availability, around your commitments. And doing less looks like an honest capacity assessment, which means asking not what should I be able to handle, but what can my system reliably hold right now without strain for a sustained amount of time. This isn't a productivity strategy. It is trust repair. You are rebuilding the relationship between your intentions and your body and your spirit and your mind and yourself. You're rebuilding the relationship between what you ask of yourself and what you're willing to protect. And that takes longer than one reset Monday or some New Year's resolutions. But it is also a lasting solution. Here's the reframe I want you to leave with. My goddaughter doesn't need to become a morning person. What she does need to do is stop treating her natural rhythm as a character flaw. And you don't need to be someone who handles more. You need to stop treating your current limit as evidence that something is wrong with you. The limits are information. And information, unlike shame, is actually useful. I want to talk to you about the first year of Alisto. Not the first year, the first 3 years of Alisto. Really, the first year was rough. The second and third year, I took a very big step back. And part of it was intentional because I was trying to train a team and I wanted them to really step up into specific roles. And part of it was just because I couldn't handle anymore. And I was constantly feeling badly because I could see in my mind how this business was going to be successful. And I could see who needed it and I could see how it was going to work. But I was having a lot of trouble implementing, following through, and achieving those things because I was constantly trying to push myself to the capacity that I knew was possible. And that was not only stretching my team past their capacity, but it was causing me to be sick and to collapse and to burn out regularly. Being able to take a full step back, and again, we're not literally talking about shutting everything down. We're talking about doing less. Being able to do less is a certain privilege. There really is a certain privilege to that, to how much is within your control of what you're able to do and what you are not able to decide for yourself, because you have responsibilities and requirements and whatever. But what you can do, no matter what, is less than what you're doing right now. Especially if you're the type of person that I'm talking to, you're already a high capacity, high achieving person. Give yourself a little bit of grace. Okay? I want to give you a moment before we close. Ask yourself quietly to yourself, whatever, it's you and yourself. Where have I been applying the bounce back pressure to myself? Ask yourself genuinely. Where have I been telling myself to just bounce back? Even today, right now, I have a migraine and I'm recording a podcast episode. Why? Because I don't have a choice. The podcast episode has to get recorded right now. But instead of working for the hour after the podcast, which is what I was planning on doing, I'm going to take a nap before my next meeting. Although I have been telling myself to just push through and to ignore it and so on and so forth, the migraine isn't going away. So I'm going to have to help myself out. Ask yourself, where have I been applying the bounce back pressure to myself? What does that pressure sound like? God, just get up. You're so lazy. Why is this an issue? And underneath that, what is your system actually asking for right now? Not what you think you should need, what you actually need. You don't have to answer out loud and you don't have to do anything with it today. Just notice. If there's a gap between those two things, between what the pressure says and what your system is asking for, that gap is worth paying attention to. So for example, if what I was saying to myself, I have a migraine right now, yes? If what I said to myself was, just push through the migraine, you'll be fine, grab an Advil, and just get back to work. Like it's gonna be fine. That's what the pressure is telling me. What my system is asking for is sleep and rest. So instead of pressuring myself through burnout, pressuring myself to bounce back, I'm going to say, hey, I really have a headache. I'm going to go ahead and do what I need to do right now and then take a rest so that I can give my system what it is asking for. And that is where the real recovery work is. It's little things, little steps, day in, day out, rebuilding your trust with yourself. And that starts with being able to hear yourself and knowing what you need and what you want, which is not easy, especially if you're a neurodivergent person, especially if you're high masking, especially if you're a complex thinker. You don't need to bounce back. You need to re-enter safely. Those are different things. Bouncing back asks, how fast can I return to who I was? Bouncing back assumes almost an identical momentum, right? For those of us who learn physics, we know that the momentum at which a ball hits the ground is the momentum that it will bounce back up in a vacuum. In real life, you always bounce a little bit less high. But bouncing back is asking, how fast can I get back to where I was before? Safe reentry asks, what does my system need to move forward without collapsing again? Another way of asking that is, what do I need? What does my system need to move forward without collapsing again? One is about proving something. Bouncing back is about proving yourself. Safe reentry is about building something. Trusting yourself. And what I have seen over and over with clients and with people I love, and honestly in my own life more times than I care to admit, is that the people who slow down intentionally recover faster and more completely than the people who force themselves back. Not because they're doing less. The person who forces themselves back is often doing more. But the person who slows down intentionally is doing the right things at the right pace with the right support. That is not weakness. That is strategy. And if the idea of slowing down feels more frightening than the burnout itself, if rest feels dangerous, and if stopping feels like you're falling behind, that's worth paying attention to as well. Because that fear is often what's keeping the cycle going. And as I love to say to my fellow neurodivergents, you are an ideator. Your brain produces ideas. An ADHD person's brain is constantly producing intellectual property and ideas. So you don't have to worry about being fastest to market. You literally generate more intellectual property in a day than the average person does in their lifetime. I don't know if that's literal. I made that up. Don't worry. You'll have another idea. And even if somebody does it faster, you might be able to do it better. And there's space for all of us. This scarcity mindset compounds the pressure that you're putting on yourself unnecessarily. Unreasonable and unnecessary expectations being compounded by unreasonable and unnecessary expectation. If what we talked about today resonates with you, if some part of you recognized yourself in this, even if you don't want to admit it right now, support exists for navigating this phase in a way that doesn't ask you to just push through. This is something that I do personally. This is my favorite part of my job, is walking clients through carefully and slowly, because the reentry piece is where a lot of people accidentally recreate the conditions that broke them down in the first place. You don't have to figure that out alone. If it feels right for you, you can always book a call with me. If you know that you're ready for a full strategy and a full pause to really see where you're at and reflect on what you want your next step to be, the links are in the description. I would be more than happy to meet with you and to figure out where you're at right now. And in the meantime, if you're being very cruel to yourself and unkind to yourself when you need more rest than most people, consider that you're wrong and that you don't need more rest. You need different recovery. And consistent recovery means protecting yourself, accommodating yourself, and putting boundaries in place that are going to protect and accommodate you long term. Until next time, squirrels, you can do this. I believe in you. You are super awesome. And it is time to believe in yourself a little bit more and to learn how to trust yourself a little bit more. See you next time. Bye.